Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 544th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sindbad the Seaman continued. When they left me in the cavern with my dead wife, and closing the mouth of the pit went their ways, I looked about me, and found myself in a vast cave full of dead bodies, that exhaled a fulsome and loathsome smell, and the air was heavy with that smell. Thereupon I fell to the ground, blaming myself for all of what I had done, saying, By Allah, I deserve all that hath befallen me, and all that shall befall me. What curse was upon me to take a wife in this city? There is no majesty, and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. As often as I have said, I have escaped from one calamity, I fall into a worse one. By Allah, this is an abominable death to die. Would heaven I had died a decent death, and been washed and shrouded like a man and a Moslem. Would I have been drowned at sea, or perished in the mountains? It would be better than to die this miserable death. And on such wise I kept blaming on my own folly and greed of gain in that black hole, knowing not night from day, and I ceased not to ban the foul fiend and to bless the Almighty Friend. Then I threw myself down on the bones of the dead, and lay there imploring Allah's help. And in the violence of my despair, invoking death, which came not to me till the fire of hunger burned my stomach, and thirst set my throat aflame, when I sat up, and feeling for the bread, ate a morsel, and upon it swallowed a mouthful of water. After this, the worst night I ever knew, I arose, and exploring the cavern, found that it extended a long way, with hollows in its sides and in its floors, and it was strewn with dead bodies and rotten bones that had lain there from olden time. So I made myself a place in a cavity of the cavern, afar from the corpses lately thrown down, and there slept. I abode thus a long while, till my provision was like to give out, and yet I ate not save but once every day or second day, nor did I drink more than an occasional draught, for fear a victual should fail me before my death. And I said to myself, Eat a little, and drink a little, belike the Lord shall vouchsafe deliverance to thee. One day, as I sat thus pondering my case, and bethinking me how I should do when my bread and water should be exhausted, behold, the stone that covered the opening was suddenly rolled away, and the light streamed down upon me. Quoth I wonder what is the matter. Happily they have brought another corpse. Then I espied folk standing about the mouth of the pit, who presently let down a dead man and a live woman, weeping and bemoaning herself, and with her an ampler supply of bread and water than usual. I saw her, and she was a beautiful woman, but she saw me not, and they closed up the opening and went away. Then I took the leg bone of a dead man, and going up to the woman, smote her on the crown of the head, and she cried one cry, and fell down in the swoon. I smote her a second and a third time till she was dead. When I laid hands on her bread and water, and found on her great plenty of ornaments and rich apparel, necklaces, jewels, and gold trinkets, for it was their custom to bury women in all their finery, I carried the vivers to my sleeping place in the cavern side, and ate and drank of them sparingly, no more than sufficed to keep the life of me, lest this provant come speedily to an end, and I perish of hunger and thirst. Yet did I never wholly lose hope in Almighty Allah. I abode thus a great while, killing all the living folk that they let down into the cavern, and taking the provisions of meat and drink, till one day, as I slept, I was awakened by something scratching and burring about the bodies in the corner of the cave. And I said, What can this be? Fearing wolves or hyenas. So I sprang up, and seizing the leg bone aforesaid, made for the noise. As soon as the thing was aware of me, it fled from me into the inward of the cavern, and lo, it was a wild beast. However, I followed it to the further end, till I saw afar off a point of light, not bigger than a star, now appearing and then disappearing. So I made for it, and as I drew near it, it grew larger and brighter, till I was certified that it was a crevice in the rock leading to the open country. And I said to myself, There must be some reason for this opening. Either it is the mouth of a second pit, such as that by which they let me down, or else it is a natural fissure in the stonery. So I bethought me a while, and nearing the light, found that it came from a breach in the backside of the mountain, which the wild beasts had enlarged by burring, that they might enter and devour the dead and freely go to and fro. When I saw this, my spirits revived and hope came back to me, and I made sure of life after having died a breath and a death. So I went on, as in a dream, making shift to scramble through the breach, found myself on the slope of a high mountain, overlooking the salt sea, and cutting off all access thereto from the island, so that none could come at the part of the beach from the city. I praised my Lord and thanked him, rejoicing greatly, and heartening myself with the prospect of deliverance. Then I returned through the crack to the cavern, and brought out all the food and water I had saved up, and donned some of the dead folks' clothes over my own, after which I gathered together all the collars and necklaces of pearls and jewels and trinkets of gold and silver, and set the precious stones and other ornaments and valuables I could find upon the corpses, and making them into bundles with the grave clothes and the raiment of the dead, carried them out of the back of the mountain facing the seashore, where I established myself, proposing to wait there till it should please Almighty Allah to send me relief by some passing ship. I visited the cavern daily, and as often as I found folk buried alive there, I killed them all indifferently, men and women, and took their victual and valuables, and transported them to my seat on the seashore. Thus I abode a long while. And Scheherazade perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 555th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sinbad the seaman continued. And after carrying all my victuals and valuables from the cavern to the coast, I abode a long while by the sea, pondering my case, till one day I caught sight of a ship passing in the midst of the clashing sea, swollen with dashing billows. I took a piece of a white shroud I had with me, and, tying it to the staff, ran along the seashore, making signals therewith, and calling to the people in the ship, till they espied me, and, hearing my shouts, sent a boat to fetch me. When it drew near, the crew called out to me, saying, Who art thou, and how camest thou to be on this mountain, whereon never saw we any in our born days? I answered, I am a gentleman, and a merchant, who hath been wrecked, and saved myself on one of the planks of the ship, which some of my goods, and by the blessing of Almighty and the decrees of destiny and my own strength and skill, after much toil and moil, I have landed with my gear in this place, where I waited some passing ship to take me off. So they took me in their boat, together with the bundles I had made of jewels and valuables from the cavern, tied up in the clothes and shrouds, and rowed back with me to the ship, where the captain said to me, How camest thou, old man, to yonder place, on yonder mountain, behind which lieth a great city? All my life I have sailed these seas, and passed to and fro hard by these heights, yet never saw a living thing save wild beasts and birds. I repeated to him the story I had told the sailors, but acquainted him with nothing of that which befallen me in the city and the cavern, lest there should be any of the islandry in the ship. Then I took out some of the best pearls I had with me, and offered them to the captain, saying, O my lord, thou hast been the means of saving me from this mountain. I have no ready money, but take this from me in requital of thy kindness and good offices. But he refused to accept it of me, saying, When we find a shipwrecked man on the seashore or an island, we take him up and give him meat and drink, and if he be naked, we clothe him. Nor take we aught from him. Nay, when we reach a port of safety, we set him ashore, and a present of our own money, and entreat him kindly and charitably for the love of Allah the Most High. So I praise that his life be long in the land, and rejoice in my escape, trusting to be delivered from my stress, and to forget my past mishaps. For every time I remember being let down into the cave with my dead wife, I shuddered in horror. Then we pursued our voyage, and sailed from island to island, and sea to sea, till we arrived at the island of the Bell, which containeth the city 2 days' journey in extent, whence out about 6 days' run we reached the island of Kala, hard by the land of Hind. This place is governed by a potent and puissant king, and it produceth excellent camphor and an abundance of the Indian rattan. Here also is a lead mine. At last, by decree of Allah, we arrived in safety at Basra town, where I tarried a few days. Then went on to Baghdad city, and finding my quarter, entered my house with lively pleasure. Then I foregathered my family and friends, who rejoiced in my happy return, and gave me joy in my safety. I laid up in my storehouses all the goods I had brought with me, and gave alms and largesse to fakirs and beggars, and clothed the widow and the orphan. Then I gave myself up to pleasure and enjoyment, returning to my merry mode of life. Thus, then, be the most marvelous adventures of my fourth voyage. But tomorrow, if you will kindly come to me, I will tell you what befell me on my fifth journey, which was yet rarer and more marvelous than those that went before. And thou, O my brother Sinbad the landsman, shalt sup with me as thou art wont, saith he who telleth the tale. When Sindbad the Seaman had made an end of his story, he called for supper. So they spread the table, and the guest ate the evening meal, after which he gave the porter 100 dinars as usual, and he and the rest of the company went their ways, glad at heart and marvelling at the tales they had heard, for that each story was more extraordinary than that went forward before it. The porter Sinbad passed the night in his own house, in all joy and cheer and wonderment, and as soon as morning came with its sheen and shone, he prayed the dawn prayer, and repaired to the house of Sindbad the seaman, who welcomed him, and bade him sit with him till the rest of the company arrived, when they ate and drank and made merry, and the talk went round amongst them. Presently their host began the narrative of the fifth journey, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 556th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the host began in these words the narrative of the fifth voyage of Sindbad the seaman. Know, O my brothers, that when I had been a while on shore after my fourth voyage, when in my comfort and pleasures and merrymaking, and in my rejoicing over my large gains and profits, I had forgotten all I had endured of perils and sufferings, and the carnal man was again seized with a longing to travel and to see foreign countries and islands. Accordingly, I bought costly merchandise suited to my purpose, and making it up into bales, repaired to Basra, where I walked about the river quay till I found a fine, tall ship, newly built, with gear unused and fitted ready for the sea. She pleased me, so I bought her, and embarking my goods in her, hired a master and crew, over whom I set certain of my slaves and servants as inspectors. A number of merchants also bought their outfits and paid me freight and passage money. Then, after reciting the Fatiha, we set sail on Allah's pool in all joy and cheer, promising ourselves a prosperous voyage and much profit. We sailed from city to city, and from island to island, and from sea to sea, viewing the cities and countries by which we passed, and selling and buying, and not a few, till one day we came to a great uninhabited island, deserted and desolate, whereon was a white dome of the biggest bulk, half buried in the sand. The merchants land to examine the dome, leaving me in the ship, and when they drew near, behold, it was a huge rook's egg. They fell a beating it with stones, knowing not what it was, and presently broke it, whereupon much water ran out of it, and the young rook appeared within. So they pulled it forth of the shell, and cut its throat, and took of it great store of meat. Now I was in the ship, and knew not what they did. But presently one of the passengers came up to me and said, O my lord, come and look at the egg that we brought to a dome. So I looked, and seeing the merchants beating it with stones, called out to them, Stop! Stop! Do not meddle with that egg, or the bird rook will come out and break our ship and destroy us. But they paid no heed to me, and gave not over smiting until the egg, when, behold, the day grew dark and dun, and the sun was hidden from us, as if some great cloud had passed over the firmament. So we raised our eyes and saw what we took for a cloud was the rook poised between us and the sun, and it was wings that darkened the day. When he came and he saw his egg broken, he cried a loud cry, whereupon his mate came flying up, and they both began circling about the ship, crying out at us with voices louder than thunder. I called to the rays and the crew, "Put out to sea and seek safety in flight before we are all destroyed." So the merchants came on board, and we cast off, and we made haste from the island to gain the open sea. When the rooks saw this, they flew off, and we crowded all sail on the ship, thinking to get out of their country. But presently the two reappeared and flew after us and stood over us, each carrying in its claw a huge boulder which it had brought from the mountain. As soon as the he-rook came up upon us, he let fall upon us the rock he held in his pounces. But the master pulled about ship so that the rock missed her by some small matter, and plunged into the waves with such violence that the ship pitched high, and then sank into the trough of the sea, and the bottom of the ocean appeared to us. Then the she-rook let fall her rock, which was bigger than her mates, and as destiny had decreed, it fell on the poop of the ship and crushed it, and the rudder flying into 20 pieces, whereupon the vessel foundered, and all and everything on board were cast into the main. As for me, I struggled for sweet life, till Almighty Allah threw in my way one of the planks of the ship, to which I clung, and bestriding it fell a-paddling with my feet. Now the ship had gone down hard by an island in the midst of the main, and the winds and the waves bore me on till permission of the Most High they cast me on the shore of the island, at the last gasp for toil and distress, and half dead with hunger and thirst. So I landed, more like a corpse than a living man, and throwing myself down on the beach, laid there a while till I began to revive and recover spirits. When I walked about the island, and found it as it were one of the garths and gardens of paradise. Its trees in abundance dight bore ripe yellow fruit for freight. Its streams ran clear and bright. Its flowers were fair with scent and to sight, and its birds warbled with delight the praises of him to whom belong permanence and all might. So I ate my fill of the fruits, and slacked my thirst with the water of the streams, till I could no more. And I thanked the Most High, and glorified him. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 557th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sinbad the seaman continued. So when I escaped drowning, and reached the island which afforded me fruit to eat and water to drink, I returned thanks to the Most High, and glorified him. After which I sat till nightfall, hearing no voice, and seeing none inhabitants. Then I laid down, well nigh dead for travail and trouble and terror, and slept without surcease till morning, when I rose and walked out about the trees, till I came to the channel of a draw well fed by a spring of running water, by which well sat an old man of venerable aspect, girt about with a waistcloth made of the fibre of palm fronds. Quoth I myself, happily this sheikh is of those who were wrecked in the ship, and hath made his way to the island. So I drew near him to salute him, and he returned my salam by signs, but spoke not. And I said to him, O eunuch mine, what causeth thee to sit here? He shook his head and moaned, and signed to me with his hands, as who should say, Take me on thy shoulders, and carry me to the other side of the well channel. And I quoth in my mind, I will deal kindly with him, and do what he desireth. It may be I shall win him by him a reward in heaven, for he may be a paralytic. So I took him on my back, and carrying him to the place whereat he pointed, said to me, Dismount at thy leisure. But he would not get off my back, and wound his legs around my neck. I looked at them, and seeing that they were like buffalo's hide for blackness and roughness, was affrighted, and would have cast him off, but he clung to me, and gripped my neck with his legs, till I was well nigh choked. The world grew black on my sight, and I fell senseless to the ground like one dead. But he still kept his seat, and raising his legs, drummed with his heels, and beat harder than palm rods my back and shoulders, till he forced me to rise for excess of pain. Then he signed to me with his hands to carry him hither and thither among the trees which bore the best fruits, and if I ever refused to do his bidding, or loitered, or took my pleasure, he beat me with his feet more grievously than I had been beaten with whips. He ceased not to signal with his hands wherever he was minded to go. So I carried him about the island like a captive slave, and he pissed and skidded on my shoulders and back, and dismounting not night nor day, when as he wished to sleep, he wound his legs around my neck, and leaned back and slept a while, then arose and beat me, whereupon I sprung up in haste, unable to gainsay him because of the pain he inflicted on me. And indeed I blamed myself, and sore repented me of having taken compassion on him, and continued in this condition, suffering fatigue not to be described, till I said to myself, I wrought him a weal, and he requited me with my ill. By Allah, never more will I do any man a service so long as I live. And again, I besought the Most High that I might die for stress of weariness and misery. And thus I abode a long while, till one day I came with him to a place wherein was abundance of gourds, many of them dry. So I took a great dry gourd, and cutting open the head, scooped out the insides, and cleaned it. After which I gathered grapes from its vine, which grew hard by, and squeezed them into the gourd till it was full of the juice. Then I stopped up the mouth, and set it in the sun, where I left it for some days, until it became strong wine. And every day I used to drink of it, to comfort and sustain me, and under my fatigues, the froward and obstinate fiend. And as often as I drank myself drunk, I forgot my troubles, and took new heart. One day he saw me drinking, and signing to me with his hand, he said to me, What is that? Quoth I, It is an excellent cordial, which cheereth the heart and reviveth the spirits. Then, being heated with wine, I ran and danced with him among the trees, clapping my hands and singing and making merry. I staggered under them by design. When he saw this, he signed to me to give him the gourd that he might drink. And I feared him, and I gave it to him. So he took it, and drank it to the dregs, cast it on the ground, whereupon he grew frolicsome, and began to clap hands, and jig to and fro on my shoulders, and he made water upon me so copiously that all my dress was drenched. But presently, the fumes of the wine rising to his head, he became helplessly drunk, and his side muscles and his limbs relaxed, and he swayed to and fro on my back. When I saw that he had lost sense for drunkenness, I put my hands to his legs, and loosing them from my neck, stooped down well nigh to the ground, and threw him at full length. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 558th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sindbad the Seaman continued. So I threw the devil off my shoulder, hardly crediting my deliverance from him, and fearing lest he should shake off his drunkenness and do me a mischief. Then I took up a great stone from among the trees, and coming up to him, smote him there on the head with all might, and crushed in his skull as he lay dead drunk. Thereupon his flesh and fat and blood being in a pulp, he died, and went to his deserts. The fire, no mercy of Allah be upon him. I then returned with a heart of ease to my former station on the seashore, and abode in that island many days, eating of the fruits and drinking of its waters, and keeping a lookout for passing ships, till one day, as I sat on the beach, recalling all that had befallen me, and saying, I wonder if Allah will save me alive and restore me to my home and family and friends. Behold, a ship was making for the island through the dashing sea and clashing waves. Presently it cast anchor, and the passengers landed. So I made for them, and when they saw me, all hastened up to me, and gathering round me, questioned me of my case, how I had come thither. I told them all that had betided me, whereat they marvelled with exceeding marvel, and said, He who rode on thy shoulder is called the Sheikh Abar, or Old Man of the Sea, and none ever felt his legs or neck, and came off alive, but thou. And those who die under him he eateth. So praised be Allah for thy safety. Then they set somewhat of food before me, where I had ate my fill, and gave me somewhat of clothes, wherewith I clad myself anew, and covered my nakedness, after they took me up into the ship, and we sailed days and nights, till fate brought us to a place called the City of Apes, builded with lofty houses, all of which gave upon the sea, and hath a single gate studded and strengthened with iron nails. Now every night, as soon as it was dusk, the dwellers in the city used to come forth of the gates, and putting out to sea in boats and ships, pass the nights upon the waters in their fear, lest the apes should come down on them from the mountains. Hearing this, I was sore troubled, remembering what I had been suffered from ape kind. Presently I landed to solace myself in the city, but meanwhile the ship set sail without me, and I repented of having gone ashore, and calling to mind my companions and what had befallen me with the apes first, and after sat down and fell a weeping and lamenting. Presently one of the town folks accosted me and said to me, O my lord, meseemeth that thou art a stranger in these parts. Yes, answered I am indeed a stranger, and a poor one, who came hither in a ship which cast anchor here, and I landed to visit the town, but when I would have gone on board again, I found that they had sailed without me. Quoth he, Come and embark with us, for if thou lie the night in the city, the apes will destroy thee. Hearkening in obedience, replied I, and rising straightway, embarked with him in one of the boats, whereupon they pushed off from shore, and anchoring a mile or so from the land, there passed the night. At daybreak they rowed back to the city and landing, where each went in about his business. Thus they did every night, for if any tarried in the town by night, the apes came down and slew him. As soon as it was day, the apes left the place and ate of the fruits of the garden, and then went back to the mountains, and slept there till nightfall, when they again came down into the city. Now this place was in the farthest part of the country of the blacks, and one of the strangest things that befell me during my sojourn in the city was on this wise. One of the company with whom I passed the night in the boat asked me, O my lord, thou art apparently a stranger in these parts. Hast thou any craft whereout thou canst work? I answered, By Allah, O my brother, I have no trade, nor know I any handicraft. I was a merchant and a man of money and substance, and had a ship of my own laden, with a great store of goods and merchandise. But it foundered at sea, and all were drowned excepting me, who saved myself on a piece of plank, which Allah vouchsafed to me of his favor. Upon this he brought me a cotton bag, and giving it to me said, Take this bag, and fill it with pebbles from the beach, and go forth with a company of the townsfolk, to whom I will give a charge respecting thee. Do as they do, and belike thou shalt gain what may further thy return voyage to thy native land. Then he carried me to the beach, where I filled my bag with pebbles, large and small. And presently we saw a company of folk issue from the town, each bearing a bag like mine, filled with pebbles. To those he committed me, commending me to their care, and saying, This man is a stranger. So take him with you, and teach him how to gather, that he may get his daily bread, and you will earn your reward and recompense in heaven. On our head and eyes be it, answered they, and bidding me welcome, fared on with me till we came to a spacious wadi, full of lofty trees and trunks, so smooth that none might climb them. Now sleeping under these trees were many apes, which when they saw us rose and fled from us, and swarmed up among the branches, whereupon my companions began to pelt them with what they had in their bags, and the apes fell to plucking of the fruit of the trees and casting them at the folk. I looked at the fruits they cast at us, and found them to be Indian or coconuts. So I chose out of the great tree full of apes, and going up to it, began to pelt them with stones, and they in turn pelted me with nuts, which I collected, as did the rest. So they had gotten before I had even made an end of my bag full of pebbles. I had gotten great plenty of nuts, and as soon as my companions had in like manner gotten as many nuts as they could carry, we returned to the city, where we arrived at the fag end of the day. Then I went into the kindly man who had brought me in company with the nut gatherers, and gave him all I had gotten, thanking him for his kindness. But he would not accept them, saying, "Sell them, and make a profit by the price." And presently he added, giving me the key of a closet in his house, "Store thy nuts in the safe place, and go thou forth every morning, and gather them as thou hast done today, and choose out the worst for sale, and supplying thyself, but lay up the rest here, so happily thou mayest collect enough to serve thee for thy return home." "Allah requite thee," answered I, and did as he advised me, going out daily with the cocoa-nut gatherers, who commended me to one another and showed me the best stocked trees. Thus I did for some time, till I had laid up great store of excellent nuts, besides a large sum of money, the price of those I had sold. I became thus at my case, and bought all I saw, and had a mind to, and passed my time pleasantly, greatly enjoying my stay in the city, till I stood on the beach one day. A great ship, steering through the heart of the sea, presently cast anchor by the shore, and landed a company of merchants, who proceeded to sell and buy and barter their goods for coconuts and other commodities. Then I went to my friend and told him of the coming of the ship, and how I had in mind to return to my own country. He said, "'Tis for thee to decide." So I thanked him for his bounties, and took leave of them. Then, going to the captain of the ship, I agreed with him for my passage, and embarked with coconuts, and what else I possessed. We weighed anchor, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease the telling of my tales for today, until it be morrow.